So
can we do a quick dive into science and God? Because I want to
not quick.
Let's try. So let's try. Can science sufficiently consistently self-actualize humans?
Well, okay.
Because with God, with religion, people find some sort of self-actualization. Can science be a source of self-actualization or morality?
Not the way that we normally construe science. Like, if you look at, let's make that concrete for a minute. When I teach my students my personality class, and we concentrate a fair bit on clinical theories because I'm a clinician, one of the things I make clear to them is that neither medicine nor clinical psychology are sciences. They're variants of engineering. They're attempting to build something. There's an end in mind. There's an ethical end in mind, right? I mean, what you do when you're a clinical psychologist is try to help people make their lives better. Now, you might say, well, you're trying to make them more mentally healthy. But actually, that's a weaker description than that you're trying to make their lives better. Because sometimes, as a clinical psychologist, you see people who are, they're normal in their health, but they would like their lives to be better. There's an up, obviously, and that introduces the ethical realm. And you might be able to use scientific techniques in order to determine which of the strategies you use to try to make your life better are working. But it's not obvious that you can use scientific principles to decide what constitutes better to begin with. That's a big problem. I don't see any evidence that you can.
Well, how about...
Because science excludes morality from its purview at the methodological level.
Well, okay, let's take an example of cancer and science solving suffering by providing solutions to cancer.
Yeah, well, should you devote money to cancer education? That's where the problems start to come, is that you can't make an a priori decision. You can't make an informed decision about where the scientific attention should focus itself. It's not an easy thing to do. At some point, the decisions have to be, they're either arbitrary or they're made by techniques that seem to be outside of the scientific purview. Let me give you an example. So I read this book by an ex-KGB agent who had detailed out some of the extent of the Soviet biological warfare program back in the 1980s. And one of the things the Soviet scientists were trying to do, according to this guy, was to weaponize infectious biological agents, which actually turns out to be harder than we suspected, thank God. And what they were trying to do was cross smallpox with Ebola. And it's because Ebola is like seriously fatal and smallpox is seriously contagious. And so they thought, well, seriously fatal plus seriously contagious, it's like, what could be better than that?
Recipe for disaster.
Right. And so, and you might say, well, is crossing Ebola with smallpox, is seeing whether you can cross Ebola with smallpox a reasonable scientific question, an appropriate scientific question? And purely from the perspective of science, yes. Because science is a generic problem-solving mechanism. Now, you might say, well, no, it's not something any reasonable human being should ever engage in, but that's not the same thing as asking whether or not it's a question within the reasonable purview of science. I mean, the thing about science is that science was designed to be as value-free a methodology as possible. It's designed for that. And so then people say, well, why is there a gap between science and values? It's like, well, because it's built into the methodology. So it looks to me like you need something that's outside of science to direct the ethic. And it seems to me that that's something like stories. Well, it can't come from within science. I don't see how. I mean, partly because you exclude the value.
Isn't the story of the cosmos already enough to get someone excited enough to find some sort of value system from the being born from the stars and that being inspirational?
No, not necessarily, because you can just as easily say, well, here we are in this little dirt ball in the middle, on the outer edge of this galaxy that's going to rotate pointlessly for the next 250 million years, a couple of dozen billion years before the heat death of the universe. It's like, that's pretty dismal accounting of the utility of life. I mean, you know what I mean? You can take you.
Sure, we're taking it from
well, you
different
have that entire range of interpretive possibilities from like, isn't life remarkable and wonderful, and to isn't it bloody pointless if you look at it from the wrong temporal perspective.
I think you can find that from science.
Well, yeah, but you can also find the reverse. So that's the problem. I'm not anti-scientific.
Yeah,
but
of course.
I don't see a simple way of solving the problem of the ethical direction of the scientific inquiry. I mean,
you don't. What comes to mind maybe as a way to get to that area?
Well, one of the things that I talked about in detail with Sam Harris, and we're going to talk about this some more because it's by no means solved, is the relationship between facts and values. And the old idea, Hume's idea, is you can't derive values from a set of facts. And I think that's sort of right, but I kind of think it's more complicated than Hume thought it was, but I'm not exactly sure why. Because like I made a case earlier about this emergent ethic arising out of iterated games. That kind of looks like a scientific observation about the origin of morality. It's something like that. So it's not like science can't inform your moral decisions, but exactly how that might come about is by no means a straightforward issue. And I mean,
fascinating.
Well, it's also not the case. It is also not self-evident that science has served a beneficial function for human beings. Like it might be the case. It could be the case. I mean, look, we're pretty comfortable here, and thank God, and that's definitely a consequence of the scientific revolution. But
you know, just highlighted your phone as a major...
Yeah, but one good hydrogen bomb blown up over North America would set us back about 50,000 years, and that could easily happen. If I was a paranoid dictator, that's certainly what I would do. And I don't know, guys, most of you guys probably know what would happen if you blow up a hydrogen bomb. I think it's about 150 miles up, something like that. One, you get an electromagnetic pulse, it takes all the electronics out, like all of them. Right. One bomb. And so, like, maybe we'll manage that, but it wouldn't. And, you know, maybe we'll manage that transition to whatever we're going to do next, but I wouldn't count on it. And so it isn't even necessarily the case that scientific endeavor is a pro-human life process. Depends on what we do with it, I suppose.